I am Ember Bahi, Twitchinishlan, Meditating Bashashin, Kisachini Dashache, Nanis is a Touchini Dashanella, Tails Elizabeth Nasha. I am from Navajo Preparatory School and I'm a junior. Let me introduce my peer, Marcus.
Hello everyone. I'm Marcus Nahale Yinishe. Twotuni Nishle, Hawaiian Bashashin, Hashkan Hotuni Dashache, Hawaiian Dashanella, Red Mesa Ben Asha. I'm also a junior here at Navajo Preparatory School, and I would like to thank you for having us. We're now going to introduce to you all Dr. Margaret Wheatley as a part of the Festival of Hope with this virtual event, a dialogue with Dr. Margaret Wheatley.
Good morning, Dr. Wheatley. Can you tell us about yourself and your life's work?
Absolutely. So when I look back at my life, I'm now 78 years old, so I have a long history to look back on. I think my curiosity and desire to understand people has been the guiding motivation, and also to see beyond the limits of Western mind, which I find increasingly crippling. It is the source of all of our conflicts, our disconnection from life and from Mother Earth, our disconnection from each other, and our continuous striving that just is so materialistically based. But for my own journey, as soon as I graduated from college, and I had a wonderful liberal arts education, which just broadened my horizons. I'm very well versed in science. I'm very well versed in history and in English, and I'm a writer as well as have been an organizational consultant. But my first work that really formed me was going into the Peace Corps in Korea when it was still a traditional non-Western influence culture in 1966. They were coming off of 11 years after the war. It was a real privilege, and it was very hard and stressful and challenging, but in the end was just a beautiful experience of living in a culture where nothing was familiar, not the language, which was very complex, not the alphabet, not the cuisine, not the culture. And after that experience, I was there for 2.5 years, living with the people and teaching junior and high school English to Korean students. Of the minimum class size was 65 students, and they were all huddled together because there was no heat in the classrooms. But their future depended on education. In some ways, you are now participating in Navajo Prep because there is a great need to educate you so you can contribute in this culture. So after that experience, which was really being immersed in a totally different and new culture and succeeding at it and loving the Korean people, I realized I could go anywhere. And that formation process led me to be able to work in all sorts of cultures. I've worked with Indigenous peoples in Canada and in the Southwest. I've worked with Aboriginal peoples in Australia. I've worked a lot in South Africa and Zimbabwe with the whole range, diversity of people who are there. And I was always happy to find our human commonality and to realize we all want the same things, and many other cultures are much better at expressing our humanity than this rational, tightened Western culture. So then I began to write. I did a lot of consulting work. I'm very familiar and known in corporate America and in all the things that I have now rejected. But I began to write introducing people to how does life organize? How does life achieve order out of chaos? This is in indigenous wisdom. This is in Asian spirituality. And so my work became focused. I've now written 10 books. And my work became focused on, can we understand a different way of organizing, a different way of being in community? Now, this is where I want to talk to you specifically, Amber and Marcus, because quite out of all those experiences, I've also raised a very large family, and I have dozens of grandchildren now. So I don't know how long ago it was. Maybe it was 2 decades ago, but I really started to draw on indigenous wisdom, indigenous ways of knowing, because I had been in those communities enough to really know there was, in the midst of the poverty, the degradation, depriving people of their connection to land, all of that, I know firsthand, especially from working with Australian Aboriginals in one community in particular. And I've written about this experience, but as we go through this increasing conflict and destruction of the spirit of life and the human spirit, my work now is focused on training warriors and activists, leaders and activists as warriors for the human spirit, whose only weapons are compassion and insight. And that takes training. That takes a very stable mind. That takes the ability to look past our judgments, stereotypes, and misperceptions of one another. And it means coming to terms, joining the community of all living beings. So my work increasingly, and this is why I really want to talk to you, is how do we reconnect with life? How do we reconnect with life's laws? I have a good science background in how the planet works as living systems, and I have a deep understanding of the history of civilizations, which makes the whole question of hope almost it's not important anymore. And what I want to say to you, and then I really want to hear from you, is my recent work on hope has been to explore this terrible place that we're in, which is just pure denial. Hope has been called named as a drug of hopium, that we're addicted to hope as we think it's the only way to motivate ourselves to keep going. So in the midst of failure, in the midst of being discounted, disrespected, ignored, defunded, all these things that are happening to all of us who are doing great work right now. In the midst of that, we grasp for hope to keep us motivated. And one of the descriptions of hopium is denying the laws of nature, thinking that through human will, effort, getting together, we will conquer, we will turn things around, just because humans have this super, it's not even superhuman. It's we're thinking of ourselves as superheroes when we think we're going to turn things around. Nature has her own laws. And again, going back to indigenous wisdom, always in every culture, traditional cultures and indigenous cultures, people knew how to partner with life. They knew how to take their proper place on the planet. So this hopium, this drug of hopium, is very attractive, but it doesn't lead anywhere progressive. My own work in training people as warriors for the human spirit is to be prepared for more hardship, more suffering. We're seeing it daily now in the intensification of war and militarism around the planet. Funds now are just going more and more to military weapons everywhere. We're seeing it daily in the planet's perfect enactment of its laws around climate and environment. And it's like, you don't mess with Mother Nature. So we're reaping the consequences of our believing we could control what goes on here as masters of the universe. But what I want to really explore with you is my own drawing now on indigenous wisdom includes a profound, shocking realization that, and I got this from my friend and colleague, Four Arrows, who is Lakota, a real genius in so many areas, lives in Mexico, but is American, but Lakota by kindred. He was brought into Lakota Nation. He's part Cherokee and in his origin. But what Four Arrows described to me is that there is no word for hope in indigenous languages anywhere. Now, I want you, please, to explore this, whether in Navajo there is any concept of hope. He's done a lot of research. He's a great academic. He's written over 20 books as well. And the only time he found an expression of hope was when a modern, and I don't know which nation he was from, he was writing about Christian hope for Christian missionaries. So he created this sense of hope. But what if I've led people now in what would it feel like to be in our work without the concept of hope? But to that, we also have to add, and this is where I really want you to go talk to your elders, because I think this is your contribution to the Festival of Hope, to bring in indigenous wisdom and ways of being. I really hope you accept that calling that I've just expressed to you. But there's also no word for deceit. There's no word for lying. There's no concept of pretending that reality is anything than what it is. And I also learned in recent research, and I've written about this now, that when the colonial invaders created these treaties with the different nations here in the United States, the white people never expected to honor the treaties. They were just sham from the beginning. You probably have learned that. But for the native peoples, I know this was true with Lakota Sioux, they looked at this behavior of, you signed a treaty and now you're not honoring it. You must be sick. You must be mentally ill to not understand reality. And I think I'm using these teachings now from many different indigenous elders because look at where we are. We're in a culture of total deceit, lying. Gaslighting is the new word of the year, meaning people try and convince you that what you see is real is not, and it's your craziness. So we're driving each other crazy. But think about it. I've asked all my students and all people who will listen to me, what would it feel like to live in a culture where there is no need for the word hope because you're in such true relationship with what's going on and you learn from that. And I want to stop here and just wonder if this wisdom has been part of your upbringing, part of your learning within Navajo Nation.
In Navajo, we do have a word for that. It is Hiwinsin. It means we find hope within ourselves. I can find hope. It is sung in our songs, and it comes from our medicine people. And, yeah.
And what is the hope within yourself? What is that? I mean, just tell me your own experience with that sense.
In my own experience of that definition is from attending some ceremonies, there's that the ideology is sung, and you can feel like the kind of emotion that's been broadcast out there, and from that you feel a sense of hope, and you can go on into your day, and you can go on to your day and achieve the achieve the dangers that are out there.
Yeah. So is that also having confidence in yourself or faith in yourself and your community?
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like it. Yeah. So it's a bigger word than the way we use hope right now, which is about hoping to achieve certain things or have certain outcomes. And what I'm hearing, and I'm loving hearing this from you and learning it from you, is this is about grounding yourself. And you do it in, if you do it in ceremony, then you're doing it as community, right? And then you go into the challenges that you know are out there. Is that a right representation of your experience? Or I think we're talking about something bigger than hope.
Yeah,
here.
I would say
Yeah.
that Navajo does have a wide vocabulary in terms of words. Like some words cannot be directly defined in English, but as a Navajo
Right.
native speaker or just a Navajo and understanding these concepts, it means a different wide of variety of things.
Yes, and that's the prison of English language, as you know. What's been your experience with this, Marcus?
Well, in Navajo, it means hope when translated to English, but there's a lot of different ways to interpret hope. Like you said, there's ways where you're just hopeful for something, but how I see it and how I use it is something that you give yourself when you feel down and you just need like an inspiration or a reason to keep going.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is what hope is, and that's what I use hope for, and that's my experience with hope is trying to get through the day using hope and using that inspiration.
So would changing that, I mean, I really understand it firsthand of needing to reconnect to keep going, right? But my own experience with it is that it's more connected to a sense of faith, I guess is the right word for me, that I know why I'm here. I know what I'm trying to accomplish. I know this is a very difficult journey we're on. And I do have to rouse myself or pump myself up frequently. But the way I pump myself up is not to think about, and I'm just expressing this personally for you to respond to, please. What I'm trying to do is locate myself in the moment with a clear understanding that I have attained over years or through contemplation of what I'm trying to do, who I'm trying to be, not pump myself up for just working harder for a certain goal or a certain activity. I find that it has to be this strong confidence that I know why I'm here. No matter what's happening, no matter how much I fail in certain projects or activities, I know what I'm trying to accomplish. How's that sit with you all?
I personally would agree with you that hope is like in simple terms, like you said, that self-confidence. Hope is like realizing, and like I said, the self-confidence, and I like would agree with you that that is what hope is used for. And that's what hope can be used for.
Yeah. What do you think, Amber?
Well, I think that hope is really difficult, and it's can be interpreted in a lot of ways, like many things, like especially from people from different backgrounds and different cultures and how they and their upbringing, and it can vary from person to person. And with that, I'd say for me, hope is an inspiration, or hope is a, let's see, hope is a good way to just keep going, or instead of just like pumping yourself up, just doesn't have to be full on, but at least having to do something or completing something at hand.
So it is tied to outcomes when you said completing something at hand. Like what happens if you fail? I guess that's, for me, the problem with hope is that if we're linked to a specific outcome or achievement and then it doesn't happen, then we feel failure. We feel a sense of, we can feel angry, frustrated, cynical.
Yeah. Well, to add on to that, the Navajo ideology, like the four representations of the four sacred mountains, we have thinking, planning, doing, and acting, and or no, thinking, planning, acting, and reflecting. On the reflecting part is where you have to think more positively and what you did throughout your day. And reflecting upon that, you would take from the different aspects of it, especially if, I guess, depending on your mood, you would take out that like if you had a bad day and you were feeling that, you would take out all the negative things. But if you were feeling okay about your day, but you still had a bad day, you would still try to take all of the positive things and reflect upon it and continue with your life.
So I don't know the origins of the four sacred mountains, but I have a feeling it's not that ancient. It sounds very modern to me to have those categories of thinking and planning, and because I don't know. I would love you to be interviewing your elders more about this topic of what hope means to them, what the word means to them, because I think you could bring that as a contribution to all the other students that you're participating with. Because go ahead.
I'd actually like to comment on what you said, that ideology is more modernized. This has been in our tradition for a long time, and it stands with us. It's a foundation of our tradition. These four ways of thinking is how we go about life, and it's just simply translated into simpler English terms, but
Modern
these
day
concepts
terms.
still stand, and it's something
So,
a part of our culture and tradition.
okay, but it's a way of thinking. But what about ceremony where you are opening to spirit and invisible beings and ancestors to lead you on? Because that's a definite part of every indigenous ceremony, right? You're not there to think and plan. I mean, I would, this is interesting for me to hear from you. I do believe that it needs to be explored with your elders, because I'm aware of ceremonies in which people, indigenous people, were accessing wisdom and knowing from beyond human, invisible beings. So it would just be interesting to bring that in, because it sounds right now very cognitive to me, but I'm glad for this conversation about it. But I'd be interested in, like, were you brought up in without a sense of lying or deceit as one of the ways being free of that awful concept that you can lie your way, you can deny reality? What was your education in that?
Well, just for me to comment on that, I feel like even in today's society, there's lying everywhere. It's not something you can
Yes.
escape with just flooding someone with culture or tradition. Since it's in our modern world, you can't escape what is already set in stone here. So it's not
Right.
a concept where you can escape that lying and be nurtured like that.
I
But,
agree.
and that's just my
But were you
opinion on it.
taught there was the possibility in earlier times with Navajo that there had been times when you, before, let's say before the invaders came, were you educated in that? I mean, yeah, we are now swimming in the water of constant deceit, but was any reference made to earlier times when this is definitely Western influence that has brought this about?
Can I add on to that? Well, in our tradition, we have this monster in our tradition where it's kind of like the lying monster, and we've been taught that since the age of time, or whenever we were created. It's part of our origin story, and we were taught that
Mm-hmm.
throughout our life. And it's taught so that we won't return back to that lying, or recognizing that lying is bad, but it still occurred, and especially back in that day, especially when like you're just playing around with your friends or something. I'm pretty sure it would still be very similar to today, how people are lying and
Mm-hmm.
acting in that deceitful way. But from our elders, we are taught to not go that way, and we're self-punished or
Yeah.
self-determined to not lie because of the monsters and the kind of what is it called, consequences that would go into, like, for example, being lazy. You, in consequences of being lazy, you would gain weight, right, or have some kind of physical aspect of it as diminishing to your own personal body.
Can I, sorry to interrupt, I just would love to jump in because I would love to honor the fact that Marcus and Amber spent a bit of time thinking of some questions. So would it be possible just at this point, I know, for example, there's lots of things about leadership they'd love to ask you about. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Amber or Marcus, would you like to go ahead with one of the questions?
Yes. I would actually like to bring up a previous dialogue with Michael Dowd. If you recall, you brought up a really good point on we do not need to control things for order. And how would young leaders use this lesson to guide them in their journey?
Well, I remember the moment in reading the new science and how life organizes, when the moment when it became shockingly clear to me, a true aha moment, that order and control are two different things. And we have a whole culture, Western, now global culture, which is focused on nothing happens unless we make it happen. So we go for control. And we think we have to plan out our lives. We have to, everything that is made comes from our intelligence, which I'm going to put in quotes because it's not very smart, of deciding what we want and then planning for it, creating an implementation plan as a leader, and then controlling people to do that work. It doesn't work. We have a long history of terrible, terrible consequences for hierarchy and for command and control management, but it's been growing and growing in relationship to the uncertainty. Now, if you are a young person starting out in leadership or starting out wanting to create positive change where you are, which I want to come back to before we close, you have to realize that you can tap into one another's creativity. You can tap into our innate motivation to want to contribute. You can tap into our innate need to work well together. These are basic human needs that get destroyed by hierarchy, roles, command, and control. So to understand that it's not up to me alone to make something happen. That's the first perspective, okay? And that I can work in partnership with other people and assume that if I create the right conditions of invitation, of good, honest conversation, really listening to one another and not being locked into stereotypical or quick judgments about each other, I can create work that will find, it will be much more creative, it will be much more powerful. And that's a kind of order, right? But it's working with natural dynamics. And I have to go back to indigenous wisdom here. It's about working with what's there, seeing past our own dominator self, right? Or our need, if we're not feeling like we're masters of the universe, we feel, well, it's not going to happen without me. Well, everything happens without us, right? So it's tapping into those the natural creativity, assuming that people want to contribute. And then you, if you're the leader of a team, you create the conditions of good conversation and good listening so that everyone can make their contribution to the work.
Oh, wow, thank you for that. That is truly amazing. I have another question to you. To truly change the culture of a company or school, we need hope. What would you suggest? What are the steps needed to be ingrained in our mindset for us to be successful?
Okay, I don't think we need hope, so we'll start there. What we need is to realize that whatever the culture is that we want to change, there are already people embodying that change. This is a very profoundly different view. Most attempts at culture change, which have failed in 75, 85% of the times, and that's information from CEOs who say their attempts at culture change have failed. But whatever the culture is that we want, you be very clear about that, but then you go and look for the people or the students who are already acting that way, and you support them, and you publicize them, and you create attention to the people who are already your role models, the exemplars. You don't need hope for that. You need faith in people. And this is the underlying message. Can we just have more faith in who people are or who they want to be, and remove the containers or the prisons that are keeping people down? Everyone wants to contribute. Everyone wants to be in good community, and everyone wants to be creative. That is generalizable across humans everywhere in the world. I'm not the source of those three things. But if you want to change the culture, you assume there are already exemplars out there, and when you value their behavior, you're also telling everyone this is what we value. This is the new culture we want everyone to move towards. But you have to have faith in people's desire to be that positive way. And you don't have to train them. You don't have to force them. You have to open the doors of the cages that we have people in. It's not a question of hoping. It's a question of, again, I'm coming back to this word faith, but this is faith in human spirit, human possibility.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to ask, or thank you for that. And I'd actually like to build on top of that. Defining hope and you said values, how would you differ these two things between values or beliefs and hope?
Okay, well, let's first define what hope is. Hope is the way it's being used now is, I want to distinguish because there's a very valid definition of hope that comes from Václav Havel, the first president of the Czech Republic, who's a beautiful poet, and he wrote the best things about hope. He said, hope is a yearning of the human spirit that's always looking beyond the horizon to create possibility. Yes. The way we're using it in our culture now and is we hope for certain specific outcomes. We hope to make a difference in a particular way. And then when it doesn't work, we experience the other side of hope, which is fear. This is throughout Asian spirituality. Hope and fear are two sides of the same energy, right? I hoped for this, it didn't happen, I feel terrible. That's in the word fear. I feel disappointment. What are values, though? They have nothing to do with this energy of positive hope, which I would say is a longing for things to become better. And our outcome-based culture, which says, no, this is the result I need, and if I don't get it, I'm going to be devastated. But values, the basic values, there was really good work done many years ago by a Hindu group called the Brahma Kumaris, who are located, and they have millions and millions of followers. They went around the world and surveyed what are the basic values of the human experience. It's very simple: to learn, to contribute, to be in good relationships. One of my colleagues, who's a great CEO of a large nonprofit, she said it's earn. Everyone wants to earn their way. Everyone wants to learn and grow and develop. Earn, learn, and belong. And if you just remember those three things, those are the core longings in all of us. We want our children to be healthy. We want life to improve for them. But we also want to have strong community, which is, there's a wonderful book that I highly recommend from interviews with indigenous wisdom keepers. Some are young, most are elders. And the title of the book is so provocative to me. It's We Are the Middle of Forever. That's not about an outcome orientation. That's about being present for whatever is confronting us, good and bad times, harvest and famine, drought and floods, all the realities of the natural world. We know how to be in all these different times. So I've spent a lot of time with that title. I just find it fascinating. We are the middle of forever. It's not going anywhere. It's not coming from anywhere. It's all about being present in the moment. And that's where we go back to these. Can we really recognize that just as you're experiencing, all the students in the Festival of Hope are embodiments of that kind of desire to contribute, right? Eagerness to learn and finding such great nourishment in being together. That's true of 8 billion people. So that was an important question to discriminate. These are two very different domains we're talking about.
Okay, so courage is a component of hope. What advice could you give us as young leaders when we come across counterintuitive ideologies to hope?
Well, you're hearing it from me. I don't think hope is useful. I think hope is a denial of what's happening. It's a set of blinders. So I'm not looking for hopeful people. I'm looking for clear seeing people, because when you move beyond hope and fear, those two inseparable partners of these emotions, what you develop is clear seeing. So that's a relationship with reality that then enables you to notice, how could I be of use here? How could I be of service? So I want to now introduce
Questions that I put in writing earlier. I think the most important way we find what's useful, what's a path of contribution. You're all seeking that in the Festival of Hope. You all want projects. You don't need to feel hopeful about those. That would be saying you need a certain outcome to feel rewarded. What you really need is clarity that this work is important no matter how it turns out. So, the questions that I teach people to ask is to look at your local situation or look within a larger global organization and ask, what's needed here? And try to see with clarity, not your judgments, not your desires, not what you're passionate about, but just look and see, what is needed here? And with that clear seeing, you get a wide range of possibilities where you could work. But the second question is just as important, because you can be overwhelmed by the amount of things that are needed, right? Very overwhelming how much is needed from us. But so the second question is, am I the right person to contribute at this time? And what that means is, do I have the skills? Do I have the stability in my own life? Do I have allies, friends, supporters? So I'm not just going to drive myself crazy by, with no boundaries. So it's noticing what's needed through clearer seeing. It's not what I want to happen, but it's seeing what is a possibility here. What's needed here, and then self-assessment. Can I do this work right now? And am I the right person to do it, or should I give that, allow it to someone else? Now, the most fulfilling, meaningful work at this time is definitely local, because we can impact community, we can support people to be ready for increased devastation, increased floods, droughts, famines. That's all happening every day now somewhere in the world. But we can also help people come together, because community being together is the ultimate resource we have. And you learned that from your tradition. Most Westerners, they got lost early on with individuation and the craziness of thinking it's all up to individuals and some are better than others. But community is the ultimate resource. Within all of your communities, there are great needs and there are great possibilities, because you're working with the human spirit that wants to earn, learn, and belong. And for me, that work is not only meaningful, it's actually joyful when we're together in good work. And that's so different than looking for hope. It's looking for what's necessary, what's needed, and then stepping into the work. And then you discover, well, maybe I wasn't right. Maybe something else is needed from me. I mean, it's all a spirit of experimentation, really. But getting connected to your community and really serving the community for what it needs is just a basic truth of life. And again, you learn this. This is how I foresee you contributing to the greater community you're part of. The Festival of Hope is bringing this deep, deep, enduring wisdom about community. non-separation. We're all relations. So that's what I've been benefiting from. Yes, Marcus.
I actually like to thank you for your answers and just this entire interview and your time with us. And just thank you, Dr. Wheatley.
Serves you well.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Amber. Brilliant. Thank you, mate. Wonderful.
And I have to say now that we're complete, I really am curious about what you might discover from your elders with these certain questions that I've asked.
Yes, I wonder is Kevin there, Marcus?
Oh, yeah, he's here.
Well, this would have to be many elders.
No, of course. I just know that Kevin was with us in Chicago, and he's a wonderful chap. We were discussing, and we had the pleasure of meeting in Chicago. I don't know whether he's there. It may not be. Oh, there he is. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Kevin.
Hello.
And he's been fantastic in helping us coordinate. So thank you, Kevin.
So I'd love to hear, if we have time, some of your responses to what we talked about, what I said, offered.
So yeah, let me clarify, because these two students, although they are going through our program, how we teach our ceremonial knowledge is not in the school system.
Of course not.
That is up to each individual student to seek that out for themselves. But when we talk about hope, and I know you had brought up that our four knowledge systems, are modern. It is not modern. It is, we as indigenous people, I mean, you even said it, that we indigenous people have this knowledge, and it's been taken from us, right? And it's been used, manipulated. Those knowledge systems, thinking, planning, action, hope, reflection, prayer, and song, are part of a 6-step process for us.
Okay, you just added the important things for me, prayer and song.
Yes. So it's already embedded. Now, when we talk about hope, it is not something, it is an important component of it. However, these 4 steps have to be completed before you yourself find hope. And that's one of the words that the students were saying, Si Huin Zin. Only from within me do I find the hope to move forward. And again, it can be a task, like you said, it's a task, or it could be a life obstacle or a challenge. It's really anything. But again, it is something we've always had. And I know you said Lakota may not have a word for hope. I'm not sure about that, but for Navajo, and I know Apache and Pueblo, we do have words that signify hope.
Yeah, well, this was not just Lakota, this was a broad expression from doing research with many indigenous peoples. But what did you think of where I was trying to see if it was what you're talking about was more about confidence in oneself or faith in oneself?
So that's what we teach, and it's in our songs and prayers. When a person is into sickness or illness, whether it be physical, mental, socio-emotional, our faith system allows us to support that person and then build them up in armor. And through that support, they find hope within themselves.
Yeah, I keep wanting to use the word confidence within oneself.
I mean, that's also like self-esteem versus self-confidence, that whole concept. Self-esteem is based off of other people's views, when self-confidence is my own self.
That I completely resonate, but yeah. And it is about preparing. From my own work, I say we're preparing ourselves as warriors for the human spirit, as people who have enough internal confidence and strength to offer themselves in service to the world.
Yeah. And that's what our philosophy system is based on, too.
Yeah.
And so
Thank you for this, Kevin.
Thank you.
is much more branded and robust for me.
So I would say from our perspective, doing this work with Festival of Hope, I've spent a lot of time with the concept of hope, and I agree, linguistically it's challenging, and a lot of people use it as a kind of hope and optimism, as you said, kind of positive hope. That's definitely not how we want to frame it out with Festival of Hope. The comment, the quote from Václav Havel, is it you mentioned? I mean, that for me was a really important one at the beginning of this process. Was like, you know, it's about acting without, you know, assuming that you know how it's going to turn out, but it's about the commitment to action. Or hope as a verb with its sleeves rolled up is another one, which is a bit more everyday, but you know, just it's about something about in yourself acting in the moment. It's not about positive aspiration towards a particular outcome.
Yeah, so Marcus and Amber, just let me share this one thing. It's a brief piece I wrote, but it was about how people are using the word hope to just get proud to say, well, I'm optimistic, and you sound awfully pessimistic, you know, and we don't, you know, and then there's the glass half full and half empty description. And what I wrote about and feel so strongly is that if you're into serving people, that you look at a glass, no matter if it's half empty or half full, you look at the glass and you notice, oh my gosh, there's water here. Who needs it? And how are we going to get it to them? You know, so that's present moment awareness. If here is something that is needed, and then I have to figure out how to get it to the people who are needing it. So again, it's just being present for what needs to happen in the moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Meg. I'd love to take you. Sorry, Marcus, Emma, thank you so much. I know it's quite intimidating, you know, with all the cameras and in that kind of host role, but you did it brilliantly, and that's so.
You did it very well. Thank you very much for, and also allowing me to lead you in questions and your own experience, which is what I think is the most valuable process. But thank you for participating with me.
Yeah, and thank you for your time as well.
I appreciated being here. Well, thank you for this interview.
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you all. Thank you, Meg. I'll be in touch.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You bye-bye.
Bye.
Are we good? Are we done?
Yeah, good job on that one.
I was getting